Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We're so blessed that you've taken the time out of your evening to join us in this fellowship. So grateful for the opportunity, and we just want to say hello to everyone in the chat. So glad you are here. They gave me the keys tonight, so I am on my own, but I've got a special guest that I'm about to bring in. So I just wanted to thank everybody first, and we're just so blessed to have this opportunity as long as it lasts. And we are going to use this weapon of the adversary, you could call it, use it against him to proclaim the word of Yah, to gather together as a one body in unity to glorify and worship him tonight. So thankful everybody's here. Before we get going, I am going to have a quick shofar blast just to get rid of any of that negative energy that might be out there. If you have one, feel free to blow it as well. So let's get this going. All right. Now that I can hear on only one ear, let me introduce my guest tonight. I'm so thankful to have him here. He is Stephen Lane, and he attends the Jacob's Tent Fellowship down in Cleveland, Tennessee. I came across him the other week as he was presenting a message, filling in for Bill Cloud, and I was just drawn to his message, and he really brought some wonderful insights. And I thought, what better place to have him here so he could share some things with us tonight on our Torah portion. So let me go ahead and bring him in. Everybody give him a welcome.
Hello.
Stephen.
Shabbat Shalom, Mishka. How are you guys?
Great to have you. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm really looking forward to this, and I hope that this may not be the last time we see you. You know, we're always welcome here, and we're just so thankful that you responded to our call and felt like joining us this evening.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I was really impressed with the different things that I saw in the ministry as we've been kind of keeping an eye on you guys for a while, and so I really appreciate the invitation. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
That is wonderful. Yes, I know Shell Wagner and Bill Cloud have done things together in the past, and so we're me and my wife are looking forward to taking a visit sometime soon down to Jacob's Tent. We're about 2 hours from you guys, so we hope that we can do that sometime soon. I know a lot of our fellowship here enjoys the online stream that you guys do each Shabbat. I believe was at 11 Eastern.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we enjoy that so much. Us personally, we don't have a local fellowship, so we do all of our stuff online, and it's another great resource that we have really enjoyed over these past few months that we've started participating in. So we have lots of people with us tonight. Thank you, everybody. We've got, I see Dan and Jennifer Lane. Great to see you guys. My wife. What's that?
My kinfolk.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Possible relation there. Let's see. We've got Robert Wagner. Brother, hope you are feeling better. I know you've been under the weather, so we are lifting you up as well. Hope that you recover very quickly. Sue Taylor, great to see you. First time here. So glad you found us. Hope this message is a blessing for you and everybody here. Judy, great to see you. Shabbat Shalom. Scott Smith, another newcomer. All right. Thank you very much. And anybody else strolling in, so thankful you are here. We got Wirewool. Great to see you. Dan as well. Shalom. So, yes, so thankful that you all decided to show up. So, before we get going, I will say a quick prayer, and then I've got a worship song I'd like to share as well, just to send up some praise to Yah before we dig into this Torah portion. So we can bow our heads. Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity that you have given us and this set apart time that you have made a covenant between us and you, that we can grow closer to you, grow further from this world. And we just ask that you bless each and every one here tonight as they give forth their praise and worship of you, that they stay on this narrow path that you have set us apart from the world. And we just are so thankful for your perfect word, your promises, and your blessings. And we are so thankful for everybody here at this Heart of the Tribe ministry, as well as Jacob's Tent, just all of us doing this for you and to grow the kingdom. And we just ask that you bless our words tonight, fill us with your Ruach HaKodesh, and then just bless Stephen for being here as well. We just lift up our praise to you in your heavenly name. Amen. All right. I am going to share a song. Came across this song earlier this week, and I just thought it was very fitting. It's called Made to Worship from Bryan McCleery. And hopefully, let me get you down. Hopefully you guys can hear it all right.
Whatever it looks like, here I am. Oh, whatever it looks like, here I am. For I was made to worship, to love you. Oh, and I was made to worship, to love you. Oh. There is joy in surrender and peace in letting go, just knowing you're in control. There's hope in knowing that morning is rising and you make all things new. Oh, in every season on this journey, I'll come up leaning on you alone. My heart will trust you, and I will lean into your understanding and not my own. You'll be the song on my lips in every season. Oh, for I was made to worship, to love you. Oh, I was made to worship, to love you. Oh, I was made to worship, to love you. Oh, in every season on this journey, I'll come up leaning on you alone. My heart will trust you, and I will lean into your understanding and not my own.
Nice.
All right. Yeah, I've really enjoyed that song, and I thought it was very fitting for our portion today. We see Joseph goes through many different seasons in his life, and what does he do? He trusts Yah and knows that he has his plan set ahead of him. And that one of my favorite verses out of Proverbs at the end, lean not unto your own understanding. There was many times where Joseph was probably like, all right, I don't know what's going on, what you have planned for me, but I'm going to trust you. And so you can see that he became victorious because he did put his trust in Yah. So I just wanted to share that. All righty. Well, would you like to start off? I know you've got some slides, and then we can just kind of go back and forth as, we would discuss. This is a virtual living room, so it's a casual discussion. We welcome any comments, questions out of the chat as well. So if you have any insight, please do share, and we'll just whatever Yah leads us to.
Well, I've always liked this Torah portion, most because I love this part of Joseph's life. Not the betrayal part, but just seeing him come into just begin that journey, towards becoming the one who saves the world, basically. And so, as we get started, they're in 37. Obviously, this is a very familiar part of the story. Joseph is brought on the scene. He is the firstborn now. Reuben has disqualified himself. He's the firstborn, and I think that's an interesting dynamic. Is that in the church we always talked about how Jacob was Yaakov. He's showing favoritism, and this is why you don't show favoritism, because it brings all these problems. And I was like, well, yes, and yes, he loved him, and yes, he could have not given him the coat. But the thing that I think that we don't really process is that he was the firstborn now, and his father was pouring into him. So that coat, if Reuben had it, they'd have, well, it's Reuben. He's the firstborn and the oldest, but being one of the youngest, and being elevated to that position, that's hard, and as Paul says, don't let him despise your youth. And Jacob was pouring all these things into him, to prepare him to lead the family, because he was going to lead the family. This wasn't a question. And so, we see him and he gives the bad report about his brothers and his fathers, listening to him, and he has the dreams, and he, Bill talks about that sometimes, our pastor Bill, and just because you've seen something doesn't necessarily mean you need to share it. And I don't dispute that. There's a time for that kind of stuff. However, he does, and they don't appreciate that. And Jacob didn't even seem to appreciate it. But eventually he ends up sending Joseph out to check on his brothers in Dothan. And I hadn't ever even looked up that. I lived next to a town called Dothan when I lived in Alabama years ago. But I didn't realize that he sent him 60 miles away on foot.
Wow.
That's a long trip, and it kind of gives, and you're looking for some people who could be anywhere in this 60 miles, But so Jacob ends up, he's out there, and they see him coming. No doubt they can see the coat. And that's, picking up in verse 18, they can see him there. And, here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him. And so Joseph comes to find him. They want to kill him. Reuben talks him out of that. He plans to free him. He plans to send him home. Judah, Yehuda, he sees the merchants, and Yosef is sold. And what stands out to me is verse 31. So if you want to put up slide 2, just so they can see the verses I'm reading. Anyway, slide 2 is that up at the top there, it says, and they took Yosef's coat, and they killed a kid of the goats, and they dipped the coat in the blood. And I had a friend who, when he started, when we got back together, he asked me one time, I've been reading in Jubilees, and it says something interesting in Jubilees. I want to know if that's what, you think. And so I had that portion from Jubilees 34 right below that. And it goes on to say, and in the 7th year of this week, he sent Yosef to learn about the welfare of his brothers, and from his house to the land of Shechem, and he found them in Dothan, and they dealt treacherously with him. And they formed a plot against him to slay him, but changing their minds, they sold him to Ishmaeli merchants. And they brought him down into Mitzrayim, and they sold him to Potiphar, the eunuch of Pharaoh, the chief of the cooks, priest of the city of Ilu. And the sons of Yaakov slaughtered a kid and dipped the coat of Yosef in the blood and sent it to Yaakov their father on the 10th of the 7th month. And that was really the question he wanted to ask me was, did they really send that coat to him on the Day of Atonement? And that got my whole mind thinking about, wow,
Wow.
the goats, it's, the thing, I'm going down to the next slide there, but Leviticus 16 kind of talks about those two goats. And I know we're all familiar with this, so I won't cover this in a lot of detail, but, he talks about, he says, and he shall take of the assembly of the children of Yasharel 2 kids of the goats for a sin offering and 1 ram for an ascending smoke offering. And we know that those 2 goats, one of them, of course, is slaughtered and his blood is used in the sacrifice, or in the making of atonement, as the priest goes all the way in and comes back out all the way out to the altar. And so his blood is sprinkled in a number of different places. And then the other goat, of course, is led off into Azazel. And it says there in Leviticus, and he shall take the 2 goats and present them before yahuah at the door of the tabernacle of the assembly. And Aharon shall cast lots upon the 2 goats, 1 lot for yahuah and the other for Azazel. And Aaron shall bring the goat upon which yahuah's lot fell and offer him for a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot fell to be for Azazel shall be presented alive before yahuah, to make an atonement for him and to let him go for Azazel into the wilderness. And so the one is killed, like I said, for his blood. The other's led off into the wilderness. And I see the brothers literally acting this out. They have just sinned by selling their brother, and they slaughter a goat and they dip his coat into that blood and send it back to their father. So they've covered, like a cover up, not the true sense of atonement, but they are covering their sin with this goat's blood. And then Joseph is like the other goat. He's the one who's literally led out into the wilderness to Azazel. And Azazel is this, name that Jubilees has for, what we would call Hasatan, the enemy, the adversary, Mastama. There's a number of names for him that come up through the scriptures. But as he's led out to Azazel, he's taken to Egypt, which is that's the seat of power in the world right there. And the enemy always seems to be in the seat of power, in the world. And that's the place where the mystery religion is headquartered at the time, So, there's a lot of interesting things about that. And so he's being led away, and he's carrying the evidence of their sin with him off to Egypt. And I thought, wow, that's kind of mind blowing to think of that, but then,
that is great.
As my brain starts making connections, Yeshua was also led off. So Matthew 1-3 there. And you guys are familiar with this. I'm just going to read a small portion of this. When yahusha was led up of the Ruach into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil, when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward hungry. And when the tempter came to him, he said, if you be the son of Elohim, command these stones to be made bread. And you guys know the rest of that story. Obviously, the enemy's trying to tempt him, and he's not having it. He's going to answer them with the word, because he is the word. He is victorious over the enemy through all those temptations. And of course, the angels come and minister after him. And I thought, wait a minute, there's a connection here. You've got in the Leviticus 16 ritual, you've got a goat being led off into the wilderness, carrying the sin. And he meets allegedly to Azazel, or carrying the sin to Azazel. Joseph, who is figuratively, representing the goats. You see the blood, the one goat that's killed, and then he's led off to Azazel. And then, of course, Messiah is both, who is more literally both goats. He's led off into the wilderness. He's not enslaved by the enemy like Joseph was. He's victorious over him. He perfectly atones for the sins of his brothers, not just covers it up. And he also dies, but is resurrected. He crushes the enemy's head in this perfect victory. And I'm kind of thankful that Yah gives us this important concept in not only the ritual form from Leviticus, and not only the literal form in Yeshua's fulfillment of it, but he gives it in a real life and practical form. Because, we understand all these things, but we really relate to that practical thing. As Yeshua would tell parables, this is like a parable almost of, how that what that picture is supposed to look like. How just as Joseph's brothers slaughtered that goat and shed its blood, that blood covers sin. We may not understand atonement fully, but we definitely understand a cover up. And all of us have done things where we covered our sin in some way, shape, or form, or hid our sin in some way, shape, or form. That's not what he's talking about. And then, of course, seeing the picture of how Yeshua was let off. I love that. I don't know what you think about that. I'll throw it over to you.
No, that's great. I love anytime we can find a parallel, with the Messiah and stories from the Old Testament, especially the Torah, these first 5 books. There was a few things that I had actually thought about that kind of compared Joseph and Messiah. I know in past episodes we've done ones with Yitzhak and, of course, Moshe. There's so many parallels that we can have between the two. But 2 that I had found was obviously many conspired to kill Messiah, just like many conspired to kill Joseph,
like
his
that.
11 brothers. It didn't really work out for him. By their actions, they tried to prevent him from ruling over them, but what they ended up doing was forcing him into a position where he would rule over them one day, in turn save their family. But I found that interesting. The other one was how we see Joseph was in the pit for 3 days, very similar to how Yahusha spent 3 days in Sheol. So yeah. I do see that there's so many parallels, and that's one thing we enjoy doing on Let's Talk Torah, is bringing those out. So that was a great point that you had about the scapegoat and covering the sin. Just really amazing.
One last little thing I almost forgot about is that Revelation 19 tells us that when Yeshua returns, he's going to return in a garment dipped in blood. And I thought, how wild would it be if he returned in like a multicolored coat dipped in blood? Because brother Yehuda would recognize that. He would say, I remember that coat. I remember that coat. And and it would be an interesting thing and point him all the way back to Joseph. So there's a lot of connections in there. It's kind of neat.
No, that's wonderful. I love that. Just looking through some of my notes, so we don't skip anything. I really enjoy the whole story on the coat. I was trying to look into it to see if there was, some description. And of course, the coat of many colors, we don't know how many colors it was. We, maybe grow up learning the childhood stories, thinking it's, looks like the zebra striped gum, but there's so many interpretations on that. I think it was obviously, compared to what the brothers were wearing, a very high class, expensive garment, that showed almost royalty, one that someone would not work in, compared to their brothers working out in the field in their tunic. But one thing I came across I thought was very interesting, and this is just something I had thought of. When you look in 1 Ezekiel 28, it says, as the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, so was the appearance of the brightness round about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of Yahuwah. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spoke. So we have a witness of seeing into the heavens. Well, we also have another witness in Revelations. John, in chapter 4, says, verse 1, after this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in the heaven, and the first voice which I heard was as if it were a trumpet talking with me, which said, come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter. And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like unto an emerald. And round about the throne were 24 seats. And upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting clothed in white garment. And they had on their heads crowns of gold. And we also have record of Lucifer before he fell as Hasatan, described as a cherubim, a spirit being in the third heaven, was decorated with many precious stones. You've got the sardius, the topaz, the diamond, the beryl, onyx, and jasper, sapphire, and emerald, carbuncle. And it says that, I'm trying to figure out where this is exactly, verse 14, that Lucifer's body formed some type of canopy over this throne. The multicolored precious stones served as prisms or mirrors. Its body reflected the glory of the colored light that radiated from yahuah. Surely all these colors formed a beautiful rainbow. And so I was reading these scriptures and I realized, well, who else has seen into the heavens? You know, we know Yaakov had the dream where he saw the gate open into the heavens. And I just thought, would this be a representation of what he saw, you know, trying to emulate this rainbow of colors to create this coat? You know, there's not much description on who made it, where it came from, but it was just kind of a connection that I thought was somewhat interesting, you know, correlating it to the rainbow and then the coat of many colors.
Amen. Amen. What was the last reference you were reading about? You were reading from?
Let's see here. It was, I believe, might have been Ezekiel 1, and then we've got Revelation 4, chapter 4.
Okay.
And that's where it describes the precious stones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was thinking of New Jerusalem, how the foundations of New Jerusalem are covered with those stones. So
Exactly, yes.
yeah, very cool. Yeah, kind of continuing on with the thought of Day of Atonement, you know, it's that we don't participate at the moment, you know, in our exile right now, we don't participate with the ritual portion of it, you know, the goats and all that part, but we do participate in the affliction part. And the other part of what I saw, at least in regards to that, was about Jacob's or Yaakov's mourning. And if you go to slide 6, I just want to read a little bit from Genesis 37. Picking up in verse 32, it said, "And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father, and said, 'This we have found. Know now whether it be your son's coat or no.' And he knew it, and said, 'It is my son's coat. An evil beast has devoured him.' Yosef is without doubt rent in pieces, and Yaakov rent his clothes, and put sackcloth upon his loins, and mourned for his son many days. And all his sons and his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted." It reminds me of what from the New Testament, where they're talking about Rachel, you know, and how Rachel's children are dead, and she refused to be comforted. Mm-hmm. But he refused to be comforted, and he said, "For I will go down unto Sheol, unto my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him, and the Midianim sold him into Mitzrayim. So it's kind of describing, that's the Genesis description, but Jubilees gives us a little bit more detail. And in the next slide, it talks about a lot more of what was going on in that morning. And it says that, and this is from Jubilees 34, you know, we're obviously, I'm quoting the Sefer right now, but I don't know whatever version Jubilees you have, but, and he mourned all that night, for they had brought it into him in the evening, and he became feverish with mourning for his death, for Joseph's death. And he said, "An evil beast has devoured Joseph." And all the members of his house mourned with him that day. And they were grieving, and they were mourning with him all that day. And his sons and his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted for his son. So I love how Jubilees and Genesis just confirm the same information back and forth. Mm-hmm. And on that day, Bilhah heard that Joseph had perished, and she died mourning him. So Bilhah, of course, is Rachel's servant and Jacob's wife. She dies mourning him, and she was living in I don't know how to pronounce that name. And Dinah also, his daughter, died after Yosef had perished. So I want to talk about Dinah and Bilhah in just a minute. But going on, it says that there came these 3 mornings upon Yasharel, upon Israel. So, it goes back and forth between Israel and Jacob in 1 month. And they buried Bilhah over against the tomb of Rachel, and Dinah also his daughter, and they buried there. And he mourned for Yosef for 1 year. And that really stuck out to me. He mourned for Yosef for 1 year. And so, I'm not familiar with the Jewish rituals. I understand it's called, they sit kiddush, or not kiddush. They sit, I can't think of what it's called. But I don't think it lasts a year, and I think it lasts 30 days, and then they light a candle, and it's kind of like, okay, done. We're going back to regular life. But you can imagine the brothers, every single day for a year, here's their father. And he's not just mourning, or he's not just sad or depressed. He's in there bitterly mourning. And so after a week, after a month, they get up. Is he still in there? He's still in there. Oh my gosh, I can't even go in there today. I can't see this. This is not what I intended. I just wanted to get rid of Joseph. I can't believe it. And the more I thought about that, as we're commanded to afflict ourselves, this is the idea of it. This kind of mourning is the idea of, oh my goodness. Hold on. Let me just think of how I want to put this. This is the picture of how the Father feels when we transgress his law. This is the picture of how the Father feels when he had to give away his own son to cover, as the atoning sacrifice to cover our sins. And as we continue on, it says, for this reason it is ordained for the children of Yasharel that they should afflict themselves on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the day that the news which made him weep for Yosef came to Yaakov. And of course, you can see the parallels. The father is mourning for his son. His father, they should make atonement for themselves thereon with a young goat, and I'll let them read the rest of that. But this is what transgressing the Torah does to our father. This is how he felt, and I know that there's a lot of opinions on what does afflicting yourself mean. And some people fast. We fast. Some people, just sit and read the word all day long, but they eat. Some people just take the day off of work. Mm-hmm. And whatever it is that you're doing, I know we're all doing what's right in our own eyes right now, but whatever it is that you're doing, if we have this picture in our mind of Jacob just mourning for a whole year, bitterly weeping, feverish, and that the whole part about Bilhah and Dinah, we'll get to that in a minute, but that just kind of blows me away too. But there is a lot going on here that we miss when we don't incorporate, these other books into our study of these things. Because Genesis, it's like if we only had Mark, or we only had John. You need Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And in a lot of ways, I think we need Genesis, Jubilees, and Jasher, to get a complete picture of what goes on, because each one just donates a little bit to the other. It's I don't know. I'll throw it over to you. What do you want to do with that?
It's definitely been a blessing, to have these extra books. I've referenced them quite a bit in the various shows I do, to see what might have been left out, something that I haven't ever come across. And it really helps restore and like you said, confirm a lot of the things that we see. So it has been a blessing for me as well. I agree with you there.
Amen.
Well, I know we have also, used the testimonies of the 12 patriarchs, and I've actually got a part I'd like to read towards the end, as we finish up here, the one from Joseph. But wow, those are truly amazing, and you get a real deep understanding of each son, what they went through, the struggles, how they ended up regretting this, for the majority of their time. What they did to Joseph, and how the anger and jealousy, caused health issues within them and all kinds of things.
Oh yeah.
It just really gives a much deeper breakdown. I know my wife and Shell Wagner on their Heart of the Tribe show, they were breaking down the 12 tribes and the body systems, how the 12 tribes correlate to the various body systems. And it was fascinating to see the connections between those. And they broke down a lot of the testaments there. And it was heart-wrenching to listen to some of those.
Man, I love the Testament of the 12 patriarchs. I've got a quote. I wanted to have two, but I've got a quote from that book. I've been actually going over. Adam's doing a little breakout of those. I don't know if you still watch. Adam.
I have seen those. Yeah, the series he's been doing.
Yeah, so he's doing a really good job. I love the point that he puts out where he says that those books give us some of the most practical teaching on how to deal with our sin. Because it's sometimes the canon, the Western canon, it does a very good job of pointing out what those sins are, how that reflects the Torah, how the Torah reflects those sins, but not as much practical information about how to deal with it. And I love that other book. I love the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs. It's definitely worth reading.
Agreed. Yeah, it's like you just see at the end of their age. All right, sons, come listen. I've got a wealth of knowledge to share with you because I have gone through it, the thick and thin, and here's how to overcome that. And it's a great point you made, a very deep lesson we can all learn from those.
Yeah. And like so many of the extra books, when you break it down, what do the extra books tell you, and probably why they were removed? They tell you to follow the Torah, to obey Levi and Judah. They tell you to do all these things. Anyway, I'm preaching to the choir here, I'm sure, amongst this audience. So all good stuff. But getting to the part about Bill, did you have anything? I want to get into Bill and Dina, but
yeah, go ahead.
Did you have anything? But Bill and Dina are fascinating in this, that they're mentioned and that they both died. Just to rehash that part, it says, on that day, Bilhah heard that Yosef had perished, and she died mourning him. And she was living in Kafratef. And Dinah also, his daughter, died after Yosef had perished. And there came these 3 mournings upon Yasharel in 1 month. And he talks about where they buried them. But I remember when I first saw this, well, actually, just before we even get to that, whenever you see a random detail, especially if it's about a woman, whether it's a sister, a mother, a daughter, that's a stop sign, because the scriptures do tend to follow the male side of the story. It's just the way it is. We don't have any. I mean, I didn't write it. Obviously nobody in this century wrote it. But when we see a woman mentioned, that's like a big stop sign. There's a detail here. And so when I see like Bilhah and Dina's death portrayed there, I want to stop and see what we have to look at. And then this gets a little involved. So I think Bill likes to say he wants to run around Mount Sinai for a little while. I'm going to need to run around Mount Sinai for a minute here, but hopefully this bears some fruit. One of the first observations you get from that is that Bilhah is a bride who was defiled by a family member and never saw her husband again. And Dinah was a virgin who was defiled by a foreigner and never became a bride. And I sat there trying to roll that around in my mind for a long time, going, okay, I see it. I see that. But what does that have to do with anything? And so, if we look into Bilhah, okay, well, so what happened with Bilhah? Well, Genesis tells us that Yasharel journeyed. Genesis, this is slide 9, if you want to read along with me. Yasharel journeyed and spread his tent beyond Migdal Eder. And it came to pass, when Yasharel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Yasharel heard of it. So that tells us that Reuben did something wrong, but it doesn't give us any details about it at all. It's like, okay, Reuben did this, and then we're moving on. And it's like, well, what happened with that? Well, why? Well, Jubilees helps out a little bit here. And it says that Yaakov went to dwell south of Magdalareth, so Migdal Eder, Magdala, same place. And he went to his father Yitzhak and Leah, his woman, on the new moon of the 10th month. So now, okay, all right. And that's what I love about Jubilees. It time date stamps everything.
Yeah.
But it confirms, that, oh, okay, so that's what happened. Jacob and Leah were gone. And they had gone to celebrate the new moon with Yitzhak. Okay. So I'm getting that. So the kids are left basically with Bilhah and Zilpah, because the parents are gone. So Reuben saw Bilhah, Rachel's maid, the concubine of his father, bathing in water in a secret place, and he loved her. Okay, I get that. And he hid himself at night, and he entered the house of Bilhah at night, and he found her sleeping alone in a bed in her house, and he lay with her. And she awoke and saw, and behold, Reuben was lying with her in the bed, and she was uncovered. And so we understand, that there's a lot of confirming things there, but it adds the detail of the new moon festival. So, okay, so the parents are off celebrating the new moon. Well, the family would have been doing probably the same thing. They're celebrating the new moon festival. And then we go to the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs, Testament of Reuben, chapter 3. It's the last little paragraph there. And here's Reuben kind of recounting to his sons, here's what I did. Here's the sin that I did. He's confessing. For had I not seen Bilhah bathing in a covered place, had I not fallen into this great iniquity, for my mind taking in the thought of the woman's nakedness suffered me not to sleep until I had wrought the abominable thing. For while Jacob our father had gone to Isaac his father, when we were in Eder near Ephratah, so this is actually right after Rachel had died, so they're still in the Ephratah area where she had died. Bilhah became drunk and was asleep, uncovered in her chamber. Having therefore gone in and beheld nakedness, I wrought the impiety. Without her perceiving it, and leaving her sleeping, I departed. And so Bilhah was not a willing participant in this. Is one thing you see. But also, Bilhah became drunk and was asleep, uncovered in her chamber. It's an important detail because, part of the celebration of the New Moon Festival would have been a feast. Bilhah had drank too much. Possibly she was mourning her friend who had just died, her sister. I mean, it's the Testimony of 12 Patriarchs, I believe, that point out that Bilhah and Zilpah were half sisters of Leah and Rachel. I don't know if you remember reading that part.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so, Bilhah and Zilpah were from servant wives, concubines, and, Leah and Rachel were not, so they were full daughters. I don't know. There's a lot to that. But as soon as I put some of those things together, it pointed me towards Noah in Genesis chapter 9. So here's the wandering around Mount Sinai part. And if you want to go to the next slide, we'll just look at a few things with Noah. And Noah became, this is in Genesis 9, Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted a vineyard, and he drank of the wine and was drunken and was uncovered within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his brothers without. This is getting interesting, maybe with some of these details. Jubilees adds, and in the 7th week of the first year of this thereof, in this Jubilee, Noah planted vines on the mountain on which the ark had rested, named Lubar, one of the Ararat mountains, and they produced fruit in the 4th year, and he did guard their fruit and gathered it in this year, in the 7th month, and he made wine therefrom and put it into a vessel and kept it until the 5th year, until the first day on the new moon of the 1st month. Okay. And of course we know what happened with Noah. I don't know if I'll have to read those other two. I think hopefully you're seeing where I'm going with this. Basically, Noah had the same thing. It was a new moon celebration. He drank too much. Okay. We're not going to go into the whole drunkenness thing tonight. He slept uncovered, and a family member entered and either saw or uncovered his father's nakedness. I know some people think that Ham did something awful to his father. I'm not going there tonight. I'm just going to notice that Bilhah's circumstances, new moon, drunkenness, uncovered, and defilement, seeing his father's nakedness, and Noah's are the same exact thing. And what did Noah do when he awoke? And both of them awoke, by the way. That was the other detail in there. And knew what had happened to them. Noah knew what Ham had done. Bilhah knew what Reuben had done. And Jacob, it says, was told by an angel exactly what had happened. So Jacob also knew what had happened. But as a result of what happened with Noah is that he ended up cursing Canaan. Well, who's living in the land where they're living right now? Canaan's descendants. And this takes us over to Dinah. Well, I could talk about Dinah for a long time. Dinah is kind of one of my things but I'm not going to talk about it for a long time. But going into Dinah, it says, and in the first year of the 6th week, we're on the next slide, by the way. It should be labeled Dinah. There we go. And in the first year on the 6th week, he went up to Shalem. This is from Jubilees again, chapter 30. To the east of Shechem in the place of the 4th month. And there they carried off Dinah, the daughter of Yaakov, into the house of Shechem, the son of Hamor the yhvh, the prince of the land. And he lay with her and defiled her. And she was a little girl, a child of 12 years old. What is Shechem? He's a pedophile. That's what we'd call him now. And then Jasher adds some more details. And basically where I want to go with all this is that as Joseph is being taken off to Egypt to carry away the son, as Joseph, who is a picture of Messiah, going off to confront Azazel, these two women die. And it's interesting. One is a bride who was defiled and would never see her husband again. And one is a virgin who would never be a bride. And all of a sudden you're like realizing, wow, there is something about Joseph being gone. There's something about Messiah dying, because Joseph is a picture of the dying, but not, but risen Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And you get into these things like, oh my gosh, hold on, let me go down here. I want to make sure I get my wording right here. Dinah is the one who's defiled, Bilhah is the one who's defiled by someone in the family who would never see her husband again. And Dinah is the one who was defiled and would never become a bride. And I know the thing that I'm pulling away from that is, one, I don't want to be the one within the body, like Reuben, who does something so awful to someone else within the body that they don't ever see their husband again. That they, and in her case, she dies. She never sees him. But imagine, if you could, the idea of someone being so crushed by what you did that they wander off and they never see Yeshua again. They never see Messiah again. And then Dinah, she's the one who's a virgin. She's the one within the body who is ready to be presented to her husband, but someone from the outside, a Shechem comes in, and just like Adam didn't guard Eve from the enemy, we don't guard our precious ones, whether it's our 12-year-old daughters or whether it's someone within the body who just loves Messiah, loves his law, walks in his ways, and they end up getting dragged off, taken like Dinah was taken. And I don't know, you can see where I'm going with this, right?
That's a great connection.
I know I went a long way around to get there to it, but that detail was added so that we would stop and look, stop and see it, and stop and make all these connections and see the similarities and understand, these things. We can't be those people. We can't be those people within the body. Anyway, I'll throw it off to you.
Yeah, it's proof right there that it can be an outside influence or someone within the family, someone within the body, to be a stumbling block to cause that kind of damage. Then we know the consequences of our own salvation, if we were to do that to one another. So that's a great connection. I love that.
Yeah. What else did you see?
I know I've got a comment here from my wife, Lee. The testaments are prophetic as well. They are speaking to the descendants. And that is true. We are the 12 tribes. And what lessons, like we talked about a few moments ago, those are vile lessons that we can all take something from.
In some way, even what Reuben did, or excuse me, never mind. Go ahead. Keep going.
You're fine.
No. I've talked too much. It's your turn.
So I just had some random little notes, kind of, I focused mainly around the coat. Obviously, I shared my thought on that. But also, we can see that I find it interesting the way Yaakov decided to treat Yosef. He was a part of that as well, growing up with his brother. Yitzhak favored Esau, his brother. So he dealt with that jealousy, I'm sure, with that favoritism. Yet he still chose to show favoritism to his own son, to Yosef. So I find that interesting how, he didn't necessarily break the bad habits.
Yeah. It makes you kind of wonder if maybe Yaakov learned his lesson with Reuben and realized, okay, I've got another firstborn here. I need to spend some serious time with him. I need to train him. I need to pour into him because I can't lose a second firstborn.
True, that's a great point.
I can't lose the second one, and I have a kind of an interesting connection to that because my oldest boys are not walking with Messiah, and one of them won't even speak to us, and so my wife and I both agreed we're not losing this last one, this young one. And so I just see what he did, and I'm like, yes. And, he is the child of I'm almost certain, short of a very great miracle, that he will be the last one. And so we agree. We're not letting him go. We're pouring everything into him, and he just, I see it, I get it, it's important to me.
Sure.
But
let's see here. Yeah, I've got this note here. Ultimately, the favoritism Yaakov showed Rachel and then Yosef cost him the very son he loved so much. If he had shown that kind of love to every member of his family, could it have been different? Would his other sons sold Yosef into slavery? If that favoritism wasn't so rampant. But you make a great point. He, didn't want to lose that other firstborn, that connection with him. Let's see here. Just looking over some of my notes. They're a little scattered. I found it, I thought it was great that, Yah placed Yosef exactly where he needed to be for the will of the Father to unfold, through all the trials he experienced, and this is such a great portion. I guess you could say that about all of them, how we can apply it to our own lives. But, every portion we come across, there's so much to glean from in our own lives. And that's what we love doing, is bringing these out, because sometimes just reading the scripture, you might pass by some of that. But when you can bring it to life and correlate it to your own life, or learn an example out of their mistakes or their trials, that's what's so beneficial, is fruit, the fruit that they give off. How can we replicate that? How can we, like we say, emulate Messiah? We will never be perfect or sinless, but we can always try our best to emulate Messiah. Amen. And I found it interesting that there is apparently, throughout the Bible, there's no record of Joseph and Daniel are the only two men where there's no record of them committing any sin or evil report. Now, obviously, we know everybody has sinned, besides Messiah, but I find that interesting that, he obviously was a very righteous man and, put Yah first in every action of his life.
It's pretty impressive how he, as a servant, he didn't just say, "Oh, Yahweh's forsaken me. I have no place left. I might as well just sleep with this woman, and just enjoy my life." And he didn't say that. He continued to walk with Yah. He continued to live a righteous life, according to the Torah. I mean, and I credit Jacob for pouring that into him, because his brothers, as we've read in the testimony of the 12 patriarchs, his brothers did not have that. He did.
Yeah, they lacked the self-control.
Yeah, they definitely did. And that's one of the beauties of that book, is it talks about all the different ways and they're not afraid to acknowledge their sin before their children and just pour it out and say, this is how I sinned, but this is how I repented. And something my wife and I have learned recently is that when your testimony is told, that information no longer has power over you. You can't be bent to the enemy's will. It's like, oh, don't cross me, or I'll reveal this about you. You reveal it all you want. I've already told everybody. So
that's great.
Yeah, and we just really appreciated that, and have been trying to implement that more in our lives. Just like make sure that there is nothing that has power over us that could keep us from serving him. And Joseph, he didn't sin. Well, I'm sure I don't know. It's hard to say. It's like there is no record of him doing anything wrong. There you go. That's probably a better way to say it.
Exactly.
There's no record of him doing anything wrong. So she didn't have any power over him. And I love the fact that he is willing to walk out of the house naked, but innocent, rather than stay there, and do something wrong. And I don't know, very challenging. And he was a 20-something, at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he was 30 yet. I know he was a slave for a good while, but he was probably a very young man at that point. And you think, we got a good flock of 20-somethings males in Jacob's tent, and I think we're more and more realizing we've got to pour into those boys.
Sure,
we got to make sure
it's the
that
youth
those guys
that the adversary is trying to trick and devour. Roaring like a roaring lion. And I've actually shared the link in the description of the Testament of Yosef. I'm going to read some here in a minute, but it is 2 chapters. And I was reading through it earlier, and you get such a deep understanding of what he went through, trying to evade this woman, and that was just throwing herself on him. He starved himself because he didn't even want to eat the food that she had, put spells on. He described her as an attractive woman, and, basically just throwing at him every day and night. And I find it amazing that, he ends up in prison because he's wrongfully accused, but he's in prison thanking Yah that he allowed him to escape from that situation. He'd rather be in a prison cell than to have been where he was being, tempted day and night by this woman, and that just goes to show his commitment to honoring his father and, the forefathers and the Torah, what had been passed down to him. And I thought it was great that, it says that yahuah favored him or found grace on him. So no matter where he was, whether he put him in charge over the house of his Adonai, over the prisoners in the prison cell, or we find him later in the next portion, in charge of Egypt, basically, for Pharaoh. And, so that's the favor. When Yah can find favor in us, we do have a responsibility, but he will always bring the best out of any situation.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And there was a great, I am going to quote, oh yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go, you go.
I'm going to quote Bill Cloud. I love watching his Torah tidbits. And this was something that just really stuck out to me. He said, to receive the glory of Yah, we must be willing to endure the suffering first.
Yeah, truth.
And it's truth. No more true than that. You know, Joseph went through a lot of suffering, but he was willing to do it. And we see the glory that he bestowed upon him through all those trials. So,
amen. Amen. Well, I just have one other thing about yahusha.
Sure.
To share. I didn't focus much on Joseph this time. I took a look at some of the things we skipped, you know, between the story, you know. But it talks, you know, Genesis 38 talks a lot about Judah and about his marriage to Shelah. And she gave him she's a wicked Canaanite woman, and she gave him Canaanite sons, you know, and of course those sons were influenced more by their mother than their father, and they were wicked. We know the story about what they did and all that kind of stuff. But I saw something, and you might recall when I taught a couple weeks on Vayeshev, the Torah portion 2 weeks ago. One of the things that stood out to me the most in that Torah portion was the two deceptions. And I don't know if you remember what I was talking about with that, but basically how Yahweh's not above a little mischief if it means keeping us on track. And so, you know, of course, he allowed the deception. You know, Rebecca was the source of it. Jacob was the semi-unwilling participant in it. But he allowed that deception because Yitzhak was about to give away the blessing to the wrong son, a son who could never have kept the covenant, and it would have died right there in Esau's hands, you know. And so allowed the deception there, and then in the teaching I pointed out that I think Leah was the one that he wanted for Jacob, for Yaakov, because she was the one who had the ability to be a matriarch. Rachel just, you know, for all her beauty, just wasn't a matriarch. You know, there's really nothing positive reported about her. You know, even on her death, you know, she's thinking of herself. Oh, this is the son of my affliction. This is the son of my suffering. It's like, you want your kid to have that name for the rest of his life. You know, she wasn't a matriarch. And so Yahweh allowed the deception that Laban, you know, had, and I talked about the connections between how, you know, I talked about all the connections between that. You can go back and listen to it, but because that would keep Jacob on track with the right wife, having the woman who would have been the one. And I went back and looked, and I think it's in Jubilees 37. I don't have the scriptures for it, but it just talks about on Leah's death, you know, after, of course, Rachel was gone and Bill is gone, and nobody really hears what happened with Zilpah. I don't know if Zilpah was alive or not. But for the most part, it was just Leah and Jacob at that point. And when she died, he just grieved. He grieved. He buried her with Sarah, you know, where the matriarch should be buried, you know, in the family tomb, not in the one in Ephratah. And it just talks about how her character was so good. She was kind. She never did a wrong thing. She never said anything. She just loved and supported Jacob. And it said that he loved her with all of his heart. And it was like, imagine if that had been the story his whole life. If there had been no Rachel, no Bilhah, no Zilpah, you know, just Jacob and Leah. Because Leah could have borne all those kids. You know, she didn't need any help. She seemed ready, more than able. She bore 6 sons to him. And she could have probably borne all of them. But in Judah's life, we see another deception. And I feel like it has to be connected to it, to the first 2 deceptions, because this is what keeps, both of those were important. Both of the previous deceptions were important. It had to do with the covenant. It had to do with who was going to accompany Jacob as he was walking through this life. He needed a woman who would keep him on track. And then here's Yehuda. You know, I talked about how he married a Canaanite woman, and her Canaanite sons and her wickedness, they all died off. But then you have Tamar. Now, the testimony of the 12 patriarchs, in Judah's testimony, he points out that Tamar was from Mesopotamia. She was not a Canaanite. And think about this, if or Onan or any of his Canaanite sons had born a child, that child would have been the firstborn. That child would have been in the line of Messiah. And that would have been a great victory for the enemy, because you would have just mixed cursed and blessed in the same line. The curse of Canaan and the blessing of Shem. You would have mixed those two in the line. Messiah couldn't have come from that. The only woman in Judah's life that could have borne him an heir was Tamar. And so what happens? You know, he won't give him the third son. She ends up deceiving him. Again, Yah allows a deception. You know, she plays the harlot there in the gate, and he comes, and she knows that she knows that Yehuda has this drinking problem. She knows that he's not moral man yet. Okay, I think he gets there, but he's not there yet. She knows he's a little bit of a religious hypocrite. And so she goes and he was, you know, because here he is. He's a total hypocrite, and he wants to burn her as soon as he hears that she's pregnant. You know, as if that means anything coming from a guy like him at the time. Yeah, I think he grows out of that. Okay, but there's Tamar. She plays the harlot. She gets pregnant through Judah. So is Tamar the wife that he should have taken? Because she's the only Shemite woman who could have borne him a son that could be within the line of Messiah. It was another time that Yahweh allows a deception to keep Israel on track. And I saw that in there, and I was like, I guess maybe I've been thinking about it a little bit more, but that had never stood out to me before. When I looked at that before. And so I was going to throw that out and see what you thought of that, and see if you had any comments about that.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. You know, he obviously has a plan. And when you had brought that up a few weeks back, which, by the way, if you have not seen that message, I do have that posted in our description as well. The one you gave at Jacob's tent, I believe, was it 2 weeks ago?
Yes, sir.
Wonderful message. But I had never personally thought of that before, that, you know, could Leah have been the intended wife, you know, what was planned for all along? And, you know, our fleshly desires, we may, you know, go after the shiny, pretty thing, but that's not always what is meant for us. And I think that was a wonderful perspective and lesson to learn, that, you know, we have to trust in Yah. And obviously, like you said, through the deception, he made things work out. And, you know, we can't doubt that he is not in charge of all things.
Amen.
There is this interesting question here. If you want to take a stab at this, do you believe Yahuwah would put a stop to a bloodline in this time? I know we were talking about that, the bloodline.
Okay, here's what I'm fuzzy about. Do I think Yahuwah, can you put that back up?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, do you believe Yahuwah would put a stop to a bloodline in this time? So I'm assuming that the question is referring to the time of Yehuda. And I don't know. I guess he didn't, because we see the lengths that he goes to make sure that the bloodline is correct. You know, so I definitely couldn't be dogmatic about that. And that's a great question. I wish I had a better answer. And maybe if you want to post Regina, is that Regina? Regan?
Yes.
Regina.
Mm-hmm.
Regina. Yeah. Regina, if you could, if you want to throw up a little bit more specific aspect to that question, I'd like to see that again.
Here. Let's see. I know she asked, are you meaning our current time? And she says, yes. She says some bloodlines are through the fathers, others are from the mothers, just trying to understand parts of my own life.
Okay, I don't know enough about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
I do know the
from the Torah
adversary
portion,
is
yeah, go ahead.
the adversary is doing everything he can to destroy the bloodline, and that connection that we just have to the Father, and we won't get too far into that, but we all know that is the current goal, I believe, of Hasatan and the adversary is to, destroy that connection that we have,
absolutely.
whether it's pure blood or being grafted in, it doesn't matter, but that bloodline is in jeopardy.
Yeah. I guess my thought was that I'm not sure what's going on in your life, Regina, but it seems as though that if we take any lesson from the Torah portion, he's more than able to work things out so that the blood, the things that happen within a family happen according to his will. And so I would take comfort in that if there's something going on that's just completely out of whack, at least in your mind, at least in what you can perceive, with our limited perspectives, that he definitely is more than able. And so I would just turn that back over to him and say, all right, I've seen what you did in the past. Let's, help me to, gosh, what am I trying to say here? Do it here. Do it here in this bloodline. Do it here in this time, and let me give you praise for it, and help me not to miss it when it happens. So I'd answer your question that way, Regina.
No, that's great. We know nothing is impossible for the Creator. We can close this up. Like I said, I did want to read just a few verses out of the Testament of Yosef.
Oh, good idea.
And if you want to finish the rest of it, like I said, I've left the link. This is a great resource, sacredtext.com. It's got all kinds of wonderful texts that sometimes are difficult to find. So this is, I believe there's 2 chapters in this, but it just gives you a comfort and really sound advice on, how to live our life. And I was just really inspired and really touched to read. I think I'll read through the first 24 verses. The copy of the Testament of Yosef. When he was about to die, he called his sons and his brethren together and said to them, my brethren and my children, hearken to Yosef, the beloved of Israel. Give ear, my sons, unto your father. I have seen in my life envy and death, yet I went not astray, but persevered in the truth of yahuah. These, my brethren, hated me, but yahuah loved me. They wished to slay me, but the Elohim of my fathers guided me. They let me down into a pit, and the Most High brought me up again. I was sold into slavery, and yahuah of all made me free. I was taken into captivity, and his strong hand secured me. I was beset with hunger, and yahuah himself nourished me. I was alone, and Elohim comforted me. I was sick, and yahuah visited me. I was in prison, and my Elohim showed favor unto me. In bonds, and he released me. Slander, and he pleaded my cause. Bitterly spoken against by the Egyptians, and he delivered me. Envied by my fellow slaves, and he exalted me. And this chief captain of Pharaoh entrusted to me his house. And I struggled against a shameless woman, urging me to transgress with her. But the Elohim of Israel, my father, delivered me from the burning flame. I was cast into prison, I was beaten, I was mocked, but Elohim granted me to find mercy in the sight of the keeper of the prison. For yahuah does not forsake them that fear him, neither in darkness, nor in bonds, nor in tribulations, nor in necessities. For Elohim is not put to shame as a man, nor as the son of man is he afraid, nor as one that is earthborn is he weak or affrighted. But in all those things does he give protection, and in diverse ways does he comfort, though for a little space he departeth to try the inclination of the soul. In temptations he showed me approved, and in all of them I endured. For endurance is a mighty charm, and patience giveth many goods. I just thought that was so powerful and such a great word to live our life by. This verse here, what I really enjoyed. Let's see, where did it go? Sorry, I lost my spot here.
Make some slides.
Though for a little space he departeth to try the inclination of the soul. You know, just like I've done studies on the word forsaken, you know, it's Yah choosing to not intervene in that moment. It's not that he's left us or cast us away, but he is choosing to let us fight through that on our own, to strengthen us, to chastise us, to run us through the fire so we come out pure, you know. And I just think that it's so important for us to remember, you know, when we are struggling or when we're going through that season that all hope seems lost. You know, he is always there. He will never forsake you. And Yosef is a great example of that.
Amen. Good word. Good word.
Well, brother, I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
You had a great message. I'm so glad that you came on and shared. I do thank everybody that chose to come and fellowship with us tonight. If I haven't got to say hello to you, I do apologize. Let me run through the chat. I see we've got some other friends that joined in. Sherry, Betty King, thank you both for being here. Missionary emissary of Elohim, good to see you. I'm glad you joined in, as well as Lou and everybody else that didn't comment. We're just so thankful you are here. Regina, thank you for your questions. James, great to see you as well, brother. I'm glad you were able to make it. And like I said, we do this every Friday evening as we enter into Shabbat. Always a little bit different, but we like to change it up, and we're just so thankful that Stephen came on today to bring a message for us. Always great to get different perspectives and the insights. Yah has made us all unique, and we all see things differently, and so that's why it is so important that we come together as one. The body must work in unity so we can be stronger, and like they say, iron sharpens iron. So what better way to praise him, lift his name up, than a fellowship of like-minded believers that are set apart from the world, you know. And so we're just so thankful for everybody, the time they spent this evening. We do hope you have a blessed Shabbat, that Yah gives you the rest and the restoration that you need for a new week ahead. We're just so thankful for the breath that he puts in us, that we can go on and live another day to be an example and to emulate Messiah and to bear those righteous, good fruits that we're called to do. So thank you, everybody. We will go ahead and sign off for now. We hope to see you next week. And shalom.
Shabbat shalom.